G'day. Today we're going to do a quick overview of what we cover in the Bonsai Challenge. What we're going to do is look at how to take a nursery stock plant, in this case a clearance $5 plant, and it's a Grevillia. And we're going to look at the process of taking it from being a small plant in a pot like this that's all overgrown and has no real shape, and how to gradually style it up, wire it, and ultimately get it into a bonsai pot. So the first thing we cover in the class is how to choose a plant. Now, this is not a great example. This is literally a low-cost plant that I've picked up. It's not got any real significance about it, but we'll discuss how to choose a plant and keep to a budget, what to look for in the base of the plant, what to look for. The first thing we're going to do is a technique called slip potting, which is taking it from a small pot like this, a larger pot like this. So this is a 14 centimetre nursery pot. This is a 200 or 20 centimetre nursery pot. So we're literally just going to take it straight from one pot size up to the next. And the reason we do that is it'll speed up the plant's growth by giving it more room to grow. So often when we buy these plants, they are quite root bound, and it will also give us the chance to inspect what we've got to work with around the trunk and roots and things like that. So the first thing that I do is either chop the pot lower so I can start to see my roots and soil, or I have a pot that I have used for several other plants. I can just literally work this plant out of this pot. So just give it a little bit of a squeeze. This one's coming out quite easily and it's not overly root bound. And I'm just going to drop it in there. You don't want your plant too wet while you're doing this, but you also don't want it too dry that your roots get hot and dry out. And what I'm going to do is just tease away some of the soil at the top and see what I have as far as root structure and trunk structure. So just being gentle so we don't do damage as we're going down. We're just going to loosen away some of that top soil just to see as we go down a centimetre or two what we have to play with. Because often these plants will have been built up in soil as they've moved from tube stock up to a bigger pot, and we can often gain a lot of trunk and possibly some interesting shapes and roots just by going down a little bit like this. So I'm down about a centimetre there. So far nothing of real interest. I've just hit a bit of a root there which I'll have a look at. I definitely don't want to go any deeper because I'm down to the level that I had cut the pot to, and that's quite a distance down. One of the other things we cover in this course are the different tools that you're going to need. So we give you options of getting them at a discounted rate. So I've just got my various tools here. I won't talk about them all now, but this one is a root rake, so I can just get in and carefully work those roots out a little bit. So you can see we've got one root that's coming up here. So up is not ideal, but we may be able to move that down once we do a proper repot. And then I've got another root over here. In fact, there's two on top of each other there that are in quite nice placement. If we keep going around, nothing at that level. But we do have a little bit of root work there that we can use. So that's just a sort of, you can start to get a feel for what your tree will look like. And I've just gained literally this much height from my tree. So if I was to drop that back in its original pot, what I had before, you could basically, we had a lower branch down here, was right on the base of my soil. So I have now gained that much extra from there. So at least probably about 2 centimetres extra trunk straight off. Now you may or may not want that, but it's up to you. At the moment we'll end up reburying most of that so that these fine roots can keep on growing. But from here we can sort of assess what might be the ideal front of our tree. So We know that we don't want roots sticking directly at us. That upward one at the moment isn't very pretty. So I'm just going to have a quick look around my tree and then we'll determine what's likely to be my front. And given this tree doesn't have a lot of features going on, it's not really going to make too much difference to me. So I'm thinking my front is going to be about there. So I've got myself a nice primary branch. One of those roots is just off to the edge of what I'm looking at. So I will probably make that my front. So what I'm going to do is go up to my bigger pot, pot it up, and I'll mark that point as my front by putting a little peg or a marker in the pot. And then I'm going to backfill over the top of these roots, not all the way up to where it was, but just so that they can survive. So I'm quite literally using a normal potting mix. In this case it is one designed for cactus and succulents because it's just a little bit more chunky and drains better, but basically an off-the-shelf mix. No special bonsai mixes or anything. And I'm just going to put that in there up to a height where it's going to bring my tree near the top. And what I'm doing is making a mound which will allow the base of the tree to definitely get soil under it. So I'm just mounding that up into the middle of the pot. And what I will do now is take my tree out of my temporary pot, and you see it's got a bit of a divot up in the bottom, so I'm just making sure that mound will get up in there. Now if these roots were really root bound, I would work them a little bit loose around the side, but these aren't, so there's no need for that. So I'll literally put that in and just work it down into that mound a little bit to make sure the soil gets in underneath it, and I'm going to backfill around it. So I'm using some of the original soil that came out of it, because it's good quality soil. And I'll just give that a bit of a tap to make it drop down the edges. Having the turntable makes spinning these things around a lot easier, especially when you get into some heavier pots. So I'm just going to re-expose that root so I can work out where my front was. Okay, so it was there. Alright, so I'm literally going to put a mark in the pot where my front is, so I can either put a stick in like I've done there, or what I often do is I'll just put a little double nick in the side of the pot so it's got a V in there, and that's a way that I can easily tell that that's where I intend my front to be as I'm working on this plant. Okay, so just gently pack it down. I don't want to push hard because I don't want to damage those weaker roots. A little bit over the top where there's a couple still exposed. Okay, and I will now give that a good water, and we'll then start to do some branch selection. So the next thing I'm going to be doing is looking at what branches I do or don't need. I've chosen my front, so my front is here. So I've just got to go through and work out, okay, what don't I need? And to do that, I'll typically strip out any branches that are unhealthy, any that are definitely growing in a downward direction that I don't want. So let's see if I can find an example of that. At a glance I'm not seeing one, but you may have a branch where you've got a main branch and then another one coming at the bottom straight down. We definitely don't want those. We may also look at branches where it's a T-bar, so you've got your straight trunk and then two branches directly off at the same point. Normally I would choose while I'm doing my wiring stage which one to get rid of, but there may be some that are obvious for us to get rid of. So I'll just go through and make that decision now. So one I can chop straight away is this one here. My front of my tree, I don't want a branch coming directly towards me, and that one is. So that is an immediate go. I'm just going to chop these with my pruning scissors, and not right at the trunk initially, just a little bit out. So I'm literally just plucking with my fingers some of the leaves from the under edge which are very close to the base of the branch. and same on the top where they're very close into the joint, because I know that I definitely won't want that. So we're basically doing what we call cleaning out at the moment. We're just cleaning out what we don't need so we can see what we do want. There's a branch in here that I know I won't be wanting, so I'll just remove that now. Well, actually no, that was coming from a different spot, so it's always good to get right back to the very base of a branch, because sometimes you can't tell when it's all dense like this where it's coming from. So again, I'm just plucking out some of the leaves in that area just so I can see a bit more clearly. So one of the things with branch selection is you normally try to choose a branch to the left, to the back, to the right, to the left, to the back, to the right. Doesn't matter if it's not in that exact order, but so it symmetrically goes up the tree. We try and do something similar to that. I think I'll remove this rear branch. Because it's slightly thicker, I'm using my branch cutters. Could have done it with a scissors, but it's just a little bit too thick. Okay, so I now have cleared out my tree so I can sort of see a structure there. I've definitely got myself a main first branch. I've got a secondary branch. I have a couple of rear branches that I can work from. And it's just a matter of me choosing from here, once I start wiring, exactly what I'm going to do. So my next step will be to wire this tree up. I'll wire all of the branches to a certain distance. I'm not going to do right to the tips because a lot of this is not going to be needed. I may keep some of it long because that will help with my fattening up of the trunk. So in the wiring stage, we will cover how to choose what thickness of wire to use, where to start wiring from, and how to wire between branches. So I'm just going to go straight in and wire this one up, and then we'll look at placing branches where we want them. Okay, so we have the major branches wired. I haven't got the tips wired or many of the offshoot branches. So I'm just going to go through and do some positioning now. So the first one will be, I've taken what was a branch, it's going to be my new main trunk. So I'm just going to introduce a little bit of movement into that. So I'm just supporting as I bend. Because these are fairly young trees, they're quite pliable. So my first branch, I'm just going to pull down a little. Now this is a little bit older branch, so I have to be a bit more gentle with it. Basically just moving them around a little to bring some to the front, some a little bit more to the back. And just to add so it doesn't look so basic and upright. So just reassessing this tree, I'm thinking I may actually lose a lot off this side and make it a cascade down, just the way this major branch is already leading. So with wiring, it's something you can play around with a fair bit, change, rethink. It's not set up once and it's locked in place. So I didn't spend any real time looking at this tree beforehand to make a decision, which I normally would have. So as a result, I'm now potentially changing some of what I thought and may need to remove a branch that I've already wired.